Hi, you've clicked onto the Tropical Tidbit for Wednesday morning, August 22nd. It's actually about 3:30 a.m. Hawaiian time as I'm recording this video, and we're tracking Hurricane Lane, a very powerful storm, one of the strongest we've seen in the Central Pacific, and located to the south of the Big Island now that you can see it at the top of your screen. The rest of the islands are hidden until I switch to a different view, but from the IR satellite shot this morning, you can see the motion of the eye a little bit more toward the north now this morning, starting this gradual turn toward the north or north-northwest that is expected to bring the storm close enough to the state to bring impacts that there are now warnings for, a hurricane warning for the Big Island and hurricane watches for islands farther northwest. I'll get to those when I get to the official forecast, but adverse and dangerous conditions could arrive as soon as late tonight or early Thursday morning on the current forecast track. And let's talk firstly about the storm structure right now. This became very powerful yesterday following an eyewall replacement cycle, which we talked about in Monday evening's video. And following that, the storm strengthened and attained winds of at least 160 miles per hour, according to Hurricane Hunter data from last night's flights. And it seems to be coming off of that peak now. If we look at the recon mission from this morning, which just left, we can see the pressure was 930 millibars at the start of the mission. That was already a bit higher than the minimum pressure observed last night, and then it rose to 938 millibars by the end of the mission. And the rising pressure there indicates a weakening of the hurricane's core, and the winds are likely coming down now off of that 160 mile per hour peak. But that doesn't mean it's not dangerous, of course, and it's important to remember that this was never going to be a Category 5 hurricane landfall in Hawaii. That was never expected, and the storm has always been expected to weaken a bit on approach, but that does not mean it's not dangerous, and these winds could still be tropical storm or hurricane force in some islands depending on exactly how close the storm core gets to the state, and there's still some uncertainty in that. We're going to talk about that. And even if the winds are coming down a bit as the storm approaches, the water threat, namely the flash flooding and mudslides that could occur due to the tall volcanic terrain, the mountainsides, and all the rain that can fall on those, over 20 inches in spots due to the upsloping up the mountainsides, all that rain can cause dangerous flash flooding, and strong and dangerous surf on the coastlines will be present as well. And so even beyond the wind threat, the water threat may be the big one. And even if the winds are weakening with the storm as it approaches Hawaii, they could still be dangerous. Tropical storm force winds can still cause problems, and that could overspread many or all of the main islands of Hawaii eventually as the storm takes this track that is currently expected. Speaking of the track, it remains a little bit problematic, and there is some uncertainty even now for Lane. This is the GFS 500 millibar forecast for 6 hours from now. It's basically the analysis showing the storm south of the Big Island where it's located now, and the ridge to its northeast, which has been steering it. You can see that here. Let me outline that a little bit better here. Lane has been tracking along the southern edge of this ridge and is now turning around the western periphery more toward the north. This is what's allowing it to approach Hawaii as it rounds the edge of this ridge. And this is all fairly straightforward, except for the fact that when we get out to about a day and a half from now, this is about 2 p.m. Hawaiian time on Thursday, you can see the storm coming up to the north here, and this ridge located to its east, which is now serving to nudge it northward. The problem with this is that this is only one level of the atmosphere, and hurricanes feel steering flow from many altitudes of the atmosphere, and we have to look at all of them to understand what direction the hurricane is going to move. I can actually show you what the GFS forecast for this is at different levels of the atmosphere. This is an area average sounding in this box around the hurricane, which is going to show us some of the steering on this side of the plot, these wind barbs at different heights. Forget all this on the left-hand side. I'm really just going to focus on these wind barbs here on the right. And what we see here is that there's steering out of the southeasterly direction in the low levels, so southeasterly wind trying to push the storm toward the northwest in this direction. We have the same sort of thing in the upper atmosphere, winds out of the southeast pushing it toward the northwest. But then in the middle part of the troposphere, we actually have winds out of the southwest trying to push the hurricane this way into the Big Island and Maui as it comes toward the north. And these steering flows are in competition with one another, and it's the combination of all of them that determines the hurricane's actual direction of movement. And the problem with that is that how much the hurricane feels the influence of this layer or this layer or this layer depends on exactly how strong the vortex is. Which one of these influences is more dominant depends on the hurricane's own strength. And since we're not exactly sure how much Lane will weaken or how quickly it will weaken due to the shear that it's currently being influenced by, we can see that on the water vapor imagery here, all these southwesterly winds south of Hawaii, Lane will be pushing into over time. That will continue to gradually weaken the storm. That's a little uncertain. In addition, the hurricane could interact with the high terrain of especially the Big Island here and potentially Maui and other islands farther west. That can wreak havoc with the hurricane's core and cause quicker weakening in some scenarios. And as a result, the steering influence on the storm is a little uncertain as it approaches the islands. It's very difficult to forecast storms near Hawaii for this reason. And because of this, it's going to be hard to know exactly what kind of track the storm takes near the islands and how close it actually gets. So there is some abnormal level of uncertainty here. The current official forecast looks like this, bringing the storm up toward the north and then having a gradual bend back to the left as the storm weakens, not making landfall but getting close enough to all of the main islands to bring impacts, and this is currently the most likely track. However, it could easily get a little bit farther east, as there is a possibility that it gets very close to the Big Island and Maui, for instance, before turning left. It's possible that it tries to get closer to Oahu, and it's possible that it tries to get closer to Kauai, and all of these things are still possible. It's also possible it tries to stay a little bit farther away, which would be more lucky. But at this point, the best estimate is that it's still close enough, not landfalling, but close enough to bring direct impacts. And it's important to note that this is only the path of the eye. Remember, if we look at the satellite picture here, the eye is this. Even if the eye takes a path that's offshore, look at how large the area of cloudiness, rainfall, wind, and weather associated with the storm is. You translate that to this track here, and you can see that it easily overspreads some of these islands, even if the storm is a couple hundred miles offshore even. So this is something to take seriously, even if the eye is not expected to make landfall on a particular island, and it's currently still uncertain which of the islands could receive the worst of Lane, given the uncertainties I just described. So be vigilant, pay attention to the forecast, as little changes could be made as we continue to track the storm and see what happens. Pay attention to NWS Honolulu, the Central Pacific Hurricane Center, and your local emergency management officials for the latest information for your specific location. This is expected to bring adverse conditions beginning late tonight. These warnings start late Wednesday night, early Thursday morning, and then the watches for later on Thursday and Friday for islands of Maui, Oahu, and the islands in between, and then potentially watches for Kauai coming later today as well. So all islands could be impacted. Do stay safe and pay attention as we go forward. That's it for now. Thanks for watching.